The sun had barely risen when Cole Everhart, a single father of two and part-time mechanic, noticed the broken-down Caravan parked awkwardly near the edge of the gravel road leading into their sleepy Arizona town. It wasn't rare to see travelers passing through, but something about this van struck him. The way it leaned slightly to one side, the back tires worn out, the windows tinted darker than usual, hiding whoever was inside. He squinted toward it before adjusting his worn-out baseball cap and muttering to himself, "Who parks like that in the middle of nowhere?" He wasn't the kind of man who ignored someone in trouble. Ever since his wife had passed away 3 years earlier, he'd raised his kids with a kind of quiet compassion that made him both respected and loved in the community. His kids, Hannah and Eli, aged 9 and 6, had grown up watching their father fix engines by day and read them fairy tales by night. That morning, after preparing their breakfast and dropping them off at the neighbor's before heading to his garage, the van had caught his attention. He rolled his truck to a stop beside it and gave a knock on the Caravan's side panel. After a moment, the door cracked open, revealing a disheveled woman in her early 30s. Her large sunglasses failed to hide the faint panic etched across her face. Her clothes were stylish, but now wrinkled, as if she'd been sleeping in them for days. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly but trying to sound composed. Cole glanced toward the flat rear tire and then back at her. "Name's Cole. Looks like you've got a rough ride. I can tow you to my shop in town. No charge." The woman hesitated. Her eyes flickered toward the winding road behind her, then back to Cole. "You're sure? I don't have much cash on me right now." Cole shrugged, didn't ask for any. She nodded slowly and opened the door wider. "I'm Ava. Nice to meet you, Ava. Let's get you out of this heat." He didn't press her with questions, didn't ask why her hands trembled or why her phone rang 3 times before she silenced it with visible distress. Instead, he towed the Caravan to his modest workshop, let her wait in the back room with a glass of lemonade, and told her to rest. For hours, she sat there silently while Cole worked on the vehicle. Later, while replacing the tire, he noticed something unusual. Custom plates registered in New York, the kind reserved for upper-tier corporate accounts. He also found a high-end handbag tucked just out of sight in the passenger seat, and a business card with a familiar logo, Strathmore Industries. He paused. That was a name he'd seen on national news, a corporation with scandals buried under diamond-studded press releases. He'd never expected to see anything tied to that world out here in this dusty, off-map town. As he tightened the last bolt, Ava appeared by the door, watching him with quiet caution. Her sunglasses were off now, revealing tired but beautiful eyes that carried secrets too heavy for someone her age. "I appreciate what you're doing, Cole," she said. "Most people would have just driven by." He leaned back on his heel. "Most people ain't raising 2 kids on their own. Teaches you to care." She smiled faintly, and for a fleeting second, the weight on her shoulders seemed to lift. But that moment shattered when a black SUV rolled slowly down the street, windows tinted, engine too quiet. Ava's breath caught in her throat. Cole noticed her flinch and followed her gaze. "You expecting company?" he asked. She shook her head, backing away instinctively. "No. I need to go. Now." "Wait," Cole said, rising. "You don't look safe." "Who are they?" She didn't answer. Instead, she grabbed her bag and darted for the Caravan. Cole stepped in front of her. "Listen," he said quietly. "I don't know what you're running from, but you don't have to run alone. I can help. But I need to know what's going on." Ava hesitated, conflict visible in her expression. Then, in a whisper barely audible, she said, "I'm the daughter of Theodore Strathmore. I was about to inherit his empire, until I found out the truth. Corruption, human rights violations, and worse. I confronted him. He tried to silence me. I ran." Cole blinked, absorbing the bombshell. "You're saying your own father's chasing you down?" She nodded. "If he finds me, I'll disappear. Just like my brother did when he questioned the family. I have proof, documents, recordings, but I can't trust anyone. Not police, not lawyers. I've been driving across states with no plan except to stay alive." The SUV parked at the end of the road. Cole didn't flinch. He grabbed the keys from her hand. "Go inside. Stay low. I'll deal with this." She opened her mouth to protest, but stopped when she saw the firm resolve in his eyes. Cole stepped out as 2 men in suits emerged from the vehicle, scanning the surroundings like hawks. "Afternoon," he called, wiping his hands on a rag. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The taller man gave a tight smile. "We're looking for someone. Woman traveling alone. Might be driving a caravan. We believe she may be in danger, and we're here to assist. Cole's eyes didn't waver. Only thing broken down out here is the truth you're selling. The men tensed. We're just doing our job, sir. So am I, Cole replied. Protecting what's mine. They exchanged a look, then one of them stepped forward. Sir, interfering with our investigation. Isn't your job illegal surveillance and intimidation? I've seen your plates. You're not law enforcement. He knew the moment he called their bluff. The suits backed off, murmured into a phone, then retreated slowly, the SUV tires spitting gravel as they sped off. Ava watched from the window, stunned. When it was over, Cole walked back in, calm but wary. They'll be back. With more. She looked at him, uncertain. Then I should go. No, he said. You'll stay. My friend from the army, he's a reporter now. Knows how to handle people like them. We'll get your story out. The real story. You came this far running. Maybe it's time to fight. Ava stared at him, this quiet, widowed mechanic who'd stepped up without hesitation, and felt something stir in her chest she hadn't felt in years. Trust. And hope. She didn't say anything. She just nodded, tears welling in her eyes, not from fear anymore, but from the realization that she'd finally found someone who didn't see her as a headline or a scandal. Just a person. Just Ava. And that changed everything. The following morning broke with a golden hush over the desert town. Ava had barely slept, but not because of fear, because of clarity. For the first time in weeks, her mind wasn't racing to calculate escape routes or second-guess the trustworthiness of a stranger. Cole had made her feel safe, in a way even her own family never had. She sat on the porch of the workshop, wrapped in one of Hannah's old blankets, watching the sun stretch over the red rocks like fingers pulling back a veil. She'd lived in penthouses, sipped champagne on yachts, and hosted gala nights with diamond chandeliers overhead, but nothing had ever felt this real, this grounding. Inside, Cole moved through the modest kitchen, preparing breakfast as though he'd done it for Ava 100 times. Hannah and Eli had come over early, still in pajamas, bubbling with morning energy. Ava smiled as she listened to Eli tell his sister that Ava was like a superhero in disguise. The innocence of children, she thought. They didn't see money, fame, or danger. Just kindness. Cole handed her a plate of toast and eggs, setting it beside her with a quiet nod. We'll call my buddy after breakfast. Name's Julian. He works for a channel that doesn't answer to the big networks. If there's anyone who can get the truth out without it being buried, it's him. Ava looked up at him. And you trust him? With my life, Cole said simply. She hesitated before nodding. Then we do it. Later that day, while the kids played in the backyard, Julian arrived in an old, dented Jeep covered in dust and bumper stickers. He was tall, thin, with sharp features and the kind of intense gaze that made people nervous, or tell the truth. When Ava stepped into the back room with him and Cole, she had the folder clutched in her arms like it was a newborn. Inside it were files she'd copied from her father's encrypted server, bank transactions, contracts with shell companies, photos of illegal mining sites, and off-the-books meetings with politicians. And the audio files, whispers of threats, deals, and worse. Julian opened the folder slowly. Do you know what you're sitting on? Ava nodded. Enough to dismantle Strathmore Industries. He didn't laugh. He just looked at Cole. And you're sure about this? She's been hunted across 3 states, Cole replied. She needs this out in the open before they disappear her. Julian nodded and got to work. Over the next 2 hours, he took notes, recorded testimony, scanned documents, and examined metadata. His calm professionalism was almost cold, but Ava understood. It was the shield he needed to carry truths that could shatter empires. When the sun began to set, Julian leaned back. I can get this out tomorrow. I'll need to disappear myself for a bit. But once it's published, your father's going to have bigger problems than finding you. And me? Ava asked, voice quiet. Julian looked at her for a long time. You'll be a target, but you'll also be untouchable if the public is behind you. That means interviews, footage, your face everywhere. Ava swallowed hard. That's what I've been trying to avoid. I know, Julian said. But secrecy gave them power. Light is the only thing they can't hide from. That night, the small town seemed quieter than usual. Cole and Ava sat on the porch, sipping tea, while the kids slept inside. The stars stretched across the black sky, untouched by city lights. Ava pulled her knees to her chest. I don't even recognize myself, she murmured. A month ago, I was in a boardroom signing contracts. Now I'm hiding in a town with no Starbucks, about to go to war with my family. Cole chuckled. Starbucks ain't all that anyway. She laughed, the sound catching her off guard. You've done more for me than anyone in my world ever did. Why? He didn't answer right away. He looked out at the night, at the moon rising over the horizon. Then he said, because you reminded me that sometimes people don't need saving. They just need someone to believe in them again. Ava turned to him. There was no pretense in his voice, no ulterior motive. Just a man with a big heart, trying to raise his kids right and do good in a world that had lost its compass. The following day, the story broke. Julian released a 30-minute exposé under the headline, Heiress turns whistleblower, Strathmore Empire's darkest secrets revealed by its own daughter. The world exploded. News anchors scrambled for coverage. Blogs dissected every detail. Social media turned Ava's face into a symbol of bravery. Hashtags spread like wildfire. Hashtag Ava exposes truth. Hashtag Strathmore files. Hashtag run to reveal. Strathmore Industries released a statement calling the allegations a fabrication by a disgruntled family member with a history of emotional instability. But the evidence was too detailed, too damning. Independent investigators confirmed the documents. One politician quietly resigned. Protesters gathered outside Strathmore's headquarters with signs reading, "Justice for the silenced." Ava couldn't step outside without someone snapping a photo. Her phone rang nonstop with interview requests. And through it all, she stayed in that tiny town, at Cole's house, protected by his quiet strength. At first, she thought it would just be for a few days. But days turned to weeks. She watched how he read bedtime stories to his kids with silly voices, how he taught Eli how to ride a bike, how he talked to his daughter about kindness and respect. She found herself drawn to the rhythm of their life, not glamorous, not perfect, but honest. And Cole, he never treated her like she was famous or broken. He just treated her like someone who mattered. One evening, after the world had started shifting from shock to support, Ava stood in the backyard watching Eli chase fireflies. Cole walked up beside her, hands in his pockets. You know, she said softly, I could probably buy 100 acres and build the safest place on earth. Cole raised an eyebrow. But I don't want to. Not alone. He looked at her, the lines around his eyes deepening. You're not alone. She turned toward him, the fading sunlight outlining her face like something out of a dream. And for a long moment, the past and future collided in that stillness. Not with words, not with grand declarations, but in the silent understanding that some of the best stories don't start with plans or promises. They begin on quiet roads, with broken-down caravans and strangers who become everything you never knew you needed. Ava stood before the camera, her hair swept back, her eyes steady but shining with a fire the world hadn't seen when she first arrived in Cole's dusty town. She wore no designer dress, no polished makeup, just a simple blouse, jeans, and the undeniable aura of someone who had risen from the ashes not for fame or vengeance, but for truth. Across the world, millions watched. The interview streamed live. Networks that once bowed to her father now broadcasted her words uncensored. My name is Ava Strathmore, she began, and I used to be the daughter of a legacy built on power. Today, I choose to be the daughter of truth. Her voice didn't shake. She didn't read from notes. She told the world about the boardrooms filled with secrets, the contracts that condemned entire communities to suffer, and the silence that followed her every question. She spoke of her brother, how he vanished after threatening to speak up, how her father spun the story, how she found out the truth too late. She spoke of the caravan, the nights she slept in fear, the men who followed her like shadows. And then she told them about Cole, about the mechanic who asked for nothing, who offered safety, not shelter, who didn't flinch when danger knocked, who put his life and the lives of his children at risk for someone who had once belonged to a world very different from his. She described his home, modest, worn, filled with warmth. She described the way his daughter looked up at her with unfiltered love, how his son's laughter reminded her of everything she thought she'd lost. I was running, she said, not just from the danger, but from the loneliness that comes with a life of wealth and silence. I found something on that road I didn't know I was searching for: honor, compassion, and a reason to stop running. Her final words were not an accusation, but a call. Let this be more than a scandal. Let this be the beginning of reckoning, of responsibility. Let my story not be about Ava Strathmore the heiress, but Ava the whistleblower, the survivor, the woman who found her voice not in towers of steel, but in a quiet workshop beside a man who never asked who I was, only who I could become. The interview went viral in less than an hour. But more than that, it ignited change. Protests surged across cities. Employees from within Strathmore Industries came forward with their own testimonies. A week later, federal investigations were launched. Her father was summoned to testify before a congressional committee, and for the first time in decades, the Strathmore name trembled, not with pride, but with the weight of consequence. Cole watched the aftermath unfold not from a distance, but from beside her. He didn't need the spotlight. His life hadn't changed with the headlines. He still fixed engines during the day, still packed school lunches, still read bedtime stories. But now he did it with Ava by his side. Not as a guest or a fugitive, but as someone who had woven herself into the very fabric of their family. There were challenges. The media tried to swarm their town, and for a while, the quiet rhythm they had found was disrupted. But Ava refused to leave. She told the world that if she had to rebuild, she'd rebuild right where she found herself again. In that small town, among people who didn't care about last names or legacy. She launched a foundation in her brother's name, dedicating it to protecting whistleblowers and exposing corporate corruption. And though she was now seen as a public figure, she did her interviews from home. Her backdrop never a studio, but the wide porch with the peeling paint and hanging wind chimes. As months passed, the world moved on to new headlines, but the ripple Ava had caused didn't fade. Strathmore Industries was dismantled. Her father's empire, once thought invincible, was fractured and sold off piece by piece. But Ava didn't return to reclaim any of it. She gave up her stake. She told the board of investors that the price of blood money was too high. And in return, she gained something else entirely. Love, not in fireworks, but in the everyday. The way Cole poured her coffee without asking how she liked it because he remembered. The way Eli insisted she tuck him in at night. The way Hannah taught her how to braid hair from YouTube tutorials, just so Ava could learn with her. The way Cole looked at her across the dinner table, eyes soft with a kind of gratitude that neither of them needed to say aloud. One evening, long after the world had stopped calling, Ava sat beside Cole under the same stars that had watched her arrive in fear. She turned to him, a smile playing at her lips. "Do you think all this happened by accident?" she asked. He looked out at the sky, then back at her. "No. I think sometimes the road breaks down exactly where you need to be found." She leaned into him, her hand brushing his. "I was lost, Cole. For so long." "You weren't lost," he whispered. "You were just waiting for the right reason to stop." And there, in the stillness, Ava understood what home really meant. Not marble floors or private jets, but safety in the arms of someone who saw you when you couldn't see yourself. Love that didn't try to rescue you, but stood beside you as you rescued yourself. Her story would forever be remembered by millions. But for Ava, the real story began the moment the world stopped watching. When the cameras turned off and the lights dimmed and all that remained was a mechanic, a woman once called an heiress, 2 children, and a house filled with second chances. It was no longer about what she had escaped. It was about what she chose to build.